In July 2025, global trade made headlines, not with a deal, but with a shock. President Donald Trump slapped a 25% tariff on nearly all Indian exports, effective August 1. This move, unprecedented in its breadth, targeted Indian textiles, electronics, auto parts, jewelry, and even generic pharmaceuticals. Washington justified it as a response to India's allegedly high tariffs and its energy ties with Russia. But India responded, not with panic, but with poise. This is India's story of resisting economic pressure, negotiating diplomacy on its terms, and emerging a beacon for the Global South's strategic autonomy. On July 30, 2025, Trump announced a sweeping 25% tariff on Indian goods, citing India's purchase of Russian oil and military equipment as aggravators. No product was spared. Electronics and pharmaceuticals were also included, which had previously been exempted, marking one of the toughest trade actions in recent memory. The tariff posed risks to nearly $40 billion in Indian exports, especially in key sectors like gems, textiles, chemicals, ceramics, and electronics, industries vital to India's growth. Economic think tanks like ANZ and S&P warned that it could shave off 40 basis points of GDP and push India's growth below 6.2% in financial year 26. Ironically, analysts noted the tariffs could hurt the U.S. more, raising prices for American consumers reliant on Indian imports across sectors. Why India was targeted? U.S. officials highlighted that India's average tariffs hovered around 17%, compared to the U.S.'s just 3.3%, calling India a major trade abuser. India's growing energy and military engagement with Russia, and its significant market share in the BRICS bloc, were seen as political triggers by Washington. India's strategic response. A day after the announcement, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal addressed Parliament. India would safeguard national interest and analyze the move's implications carefully. The government confirmed ongoing negotiations for a mutually beneficial trade deal. India reserved its retaliatory rights under WTO norms, signaling readiness to impose counter-tariffs, but only if negotiations failed. India remained engaged in trade negotiations, including an upcoming U.S. delegation visit to Delhi in August and plans for the sixth round of early trade talks budgeting around $500 billion bilateral trade by 2030. So how India is tackling U.S. pressure? Balanced trade diplomacy. Despite the tariff threat, India remained open to discussions. At his Washington meeting on February 13, 2025, PM Modi emphasized energy purchases and defense cooperation with the U.S., while staying firm on issues like market access to dairy and agriculture. Selective tariff reductions. India is considering cutting or eliminating tariffs on $23 billion worth of U.S. goods, including almonds, whiskey, lentils, and certain agri-exports to avoid the U.S.'s retaliatory tariffs impacting 87% of Indian exports worth $66 billion. However, India refused to drop tariffs on core agricultural products like rice, wheat, dairy, and took care to protect its domestic automakers, delaying full auto tariff cuts despite U.S. pressure for Tesla and others. Legislative and public diplomacy. Indian officials highlighted that, unlike other nations, India had not made any formal commitments to cut tariffs, underscoring a non-aligned negotiation strategy rather than unilateral concessions. Industry think tanks stressed that the U.S. should exempt India from blanket tariffs given the constructive engagement and potential bilateral growth, aligned with Mission 500 to expand trade to $500 billion by 2030. India's larger narrative is to continue purchasing Russian oil and arms, even under U.S. criticism, underlining strategic sovereignty. As Trump announced new penalties for India's Russian deals, India maintained its course. At global forums like G20, BRICS, and WTO, India reiterated its stand on trade justice, resisting extraterritorial leverages like U.S. Section 301 actions. India invested in digital infrastructure, UPI, ONDC, and the Manufacturing-Linked Incentives, PLI, program, reducing overdependence on imported goods, especially from the U.S. and China, and signaling self-reliant growth. So why India's approach is leading example to the world? While many countries succumbed to tariff demands or trade coercion, India stuck to principle, balancing engagement with defiance. Emerging economies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are now viewing India's model, pragmatic, sovereign, diversified, as a template for assertive diplomacy. U.S. companies like Microsoft, Tesla, Amazon, and Google continued deepening investments in India, demonstrating that market opportunity often outweighs political friction. This tariff episode was meant to corner India, but instead, it catalyzed its global strategy. India refused to be boxed in. It stayed engaged, negotiated selectively, diversified trade partners, and upheld its sovereignty. Rather than simply reacting, India is reshaping the narrative. Global rise belongs to those who define their own terms, not those who bend to pressure. Subscribe channel for more such stories.